The following is a list of cameo appearances by Stan Lee in Marvel Comics films, television shows and video games. A prolific comic book writer, editor, publisher, and producer, Lee has also had numerous cameos in films that are not Marvel's and other media. Biography. Early life. Stanley Martin Lieber was born on December 28, 1922, in Manhattan, New York City, in the apartment of his Romanian-born Jewish immigrant parents, Celia and Jack Lieber, at the corner of West 98th Street and West End Avenue. Lee was raised in a Jewish household, and in a 2002 interview, he stated when asked if he believed in God, "Well, let me put it this way. No, I'm not going to try to be clever. I really don't know. I just don't know." On another interview from 2011, when asked about his Romanian origins and his relationship with the country, he said that he had never visited it and that he did not know Romanian because his parents never taught it to him. Lee's father, trained as a dress cutter, worked only sporadically after the Great Depression, and the family moved further uptown to Fort Washington Avenue, in Washington Heights, Manhattan. Lee had one younger brother named Larry Lieber. He said in 2006 that as a child he was influenced by books and movies, particularly those with Errol Flynn playing heroic roles. Reading The Scarlet Pimpernel, he called the title character the first superhero I had read about, the first character who could be called a superhero. By the time Lee was in his teens, the family was living in an apartment at 1720 University Avenue in the Bronx. Lee described it as a third-floor apartment facing out back. Lee and his brother shared the bedroom, while their parents slept on a fold-out couch. Lee attended DeWitt Clinton High School in the Bronx. In his youth, Lee enjoyed writing, and entertained dreams of writing the great American novel one day. He said that in his youth he worked such part-time jobs as writing obituaries for a news service and press releases for the National Tuberculosis Center, delivering sandwiches for the Jack May Pharmacy to offices in Rockefeller Center, working as an office boy for a trouser manufacturer, ushering at the Rivoli Theater on Broadway, and selling subscriptions to the New York Herald Tribune newspaper. At 15, Lee entered a high school essay competition sponsored by the New York Herald Tribune, called the Biggest News of the Week contest. Lee claimed to have won the prize for 3 straight weeks, goading the newspaper to write him and ask him to let someone else win. The paper suggested he look into writing professionally, which Lee claimed probably changed my life. He graduated from high school early, aged 16 and a half, in 1939 and joined the WPA Federal Theater Project. Marriage and residences. From 1945 to 1947, Lee lived in the rented top floor of a brownstone in the East 90s in Manhattan. He married Joan Clayton Bucock, originally from Newcastle, England, on December 5, 1947, and in 1949, the couple bought a house in Woodmere, New York, on Long Island, living there through 1952. Their daughter Joan Celia J.C. Lee was born in 1950. Another daughter, Jan Lee, died a few days after her birth in 1953. The Lees resided in the Long Island town of Hewlett Harbor, New York, from 1952 to 1980. They also owned a condominium on East 63rd Street in Manhattan from 1975 to 1980, and during the 1970s they owned a vacation home in Remsenburg, New York. For their move to the West Coast in 1981, they bought a home in West Hollywood, California, previously owned by comedian Jack Benny's radio announcer Don Wilson. Philanthropy. The Stan Lee Foundation was founded in 2010 to focus on literacy, education, and the arts. Its stated goals include supporting programs and ideas that improve access to literacy resources, as well as promoting diversity, national literacy, culture, and the arts. Lee donated portions of his personal effects to the University of Wyoming at various times, between 1981 and 2001. Legal concerns. Lee engaged in several legal actions in his later years. Intellectual property. Sexual harassment allegations. Victim of elder abuse. Later years and death. In September 2012, Lee underwent an operation to insert a pacemaker, which required canceling planned appearances at conventions. Lee eventually retired from convention appearances by 2017. On July 6, 2017, Joan Bucock, his wife of 69 years, died of complications from a stroke. She was 95 years old. Lee died on November 12, 2018, just 1 month before his 96th birthday, at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, after being rushed there for a medical emergency earlier in the day. Lee had previously been hospitalized for pneumonia in February of that year. The immediate cause of death listed on his death certificate was cardiac arrest with respiratory failure and congestive heart failure as underlying causes. It also indicated that he suffered from aspiration pneumonia. His body was cremated and his ashes were given to his daughter. Roy Thomas, who succeeded Lee as editor-in-chief at Marvel, had visited Lee 2 days prior to his death to discuss the upcoming book The Stan Lee Story and stated, "I think he was ready to go. But he was still talking about doing more cameos. As long as he had the energy for it and didn't have to travel, Stan was always up to do some more cameos. He got a kick out of those more than anything else." Publishing career. Early career. With the help of his uncle Robbie Solomon, Lee became an assistant in 1939 at the New Timely Comics division belonging to pulp magazine and comic book publisher Martin Goodman. Timely, by the 1960s, would evolve into Marvel Comics. Lee, whose cousin Jean was Goodman's wife, was formally hired by Timely editor Joe Simon. His duties were prosaic at first. "In those days dipped the pen in ink, I had to make sure the inkwells were filled," Lee recalled in 2009. "I went down and got them their lunch, I did proofreading, I erased the pencils from the finished pages for them." Marshalling his childhood ambition to be a writer, young Stanley Lieber made his comic book debut with the text filler Captain America Foils the Traitor's Revenge in Captain America Comics No. 3, using the pseudonym Stan Lee, which years later he would adopt as his legal name. Lee later explained in his autobiography and numerous other sources that because of the low social status of comic books, he was so embarrassed that he used a pen name so nobody would associate his real name with comics when he wrote the great American novel One Day. This initial story also introduced Captain America's trademark ricocheting shield toss. 11. It would be adapted into a sequential art story in 2014 by Lee and Bruce Timm in Marvel's 75th anniversary celebration. Lee graduated from writing filler to actual comics with a backup feature, Headline Hunter, Foreign Correspondent, 2 issues later, using the pseudonym Real Nats. His first superhero CO creation was the Destroyer, in Mystic Comics No. 6. Other characters he CO created during this period, called the Golden Age of comic books, include Jack Frost, debuting in USA Comics No. 1, and Father Time, debuting in Captain America Comics No. 6, 12-13 when Simon and his creative partner Jack Kirby left in late 1941 following a dispute with Goodman. The 30-year-old publisher installed Lee, just under 19 years old, as interim editor. 14 The youngster showed a knack for the business that led him to remain as the comic book division's editor-in-chief, as well as art director for much of that time, until 1972, when he would succeed Goodman as publisher. Lee entered the United States Army in early 1942 and served within the U.S. as a member of the Signal Corps, repairing telegraph poles and other communications equipment. He was later transferred to the training film division, where he worked writing manuals, training films, slogans, and occasionally cartooning. His military classification, he said, was playwright. He added that only 9 men in the U.S. Army were given that title. In the Army, Lee's division included many famous or soon-to-be famous people, including 3-time Academy Award-winning director Frank Capra, New Yorker cartoonist Charles Addams, and children's book writer and illustrator Theodore Geisel, later known to the world as Dr. Seuss. Vincent Fago, editor of Timely's Animation Comics section, which put out humor and talking animal comics, filled in until Lee returned from his World War II military service in 1945. Lee was inducted into the Signal Corps Regimental Association and was given honorary membership of the 2nd Battalion of 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment out of Joint Base Lewis McChord at the 2017 Emerald City Comic Con for his prior service. While in the Army, Lee received letters every week on Friday from the editors at Timely, detailing what they needed written and by when. Lee would write stories, then send them back on Monday. One week, the mail clerk overlooked his letter, explaining that nothing was in Lee's mailbox. The next day, Lee went by the closed mailroom and saw an envelope with the return address of Timely Comics in his mailbox. Not willing to miss a deadline, Lee asked the officer in charge to open the mailroom, but the latter refused. So Lee took a screwdriver and unscrewed the mailbox hinges, retrieving the envelope containing his assignment. The mailroom officer saw what he did and turned him into the base captain, who did not like Lee. He faced tampering charges and could have been sent to Leavenworth Prison. The colonel in charge of the finance department intervened and saved Lee from disciplinary action. In the mid-1950s, by which time the company was now generally known as Atlas Comics, Lee wrote stories in a variety of genres including romance, westerns, humor, science fiction, medieval adventure, horror, and suspense. In the 1950s, Lee teamed up with his comic book colleague Dan DiCarlo to produce the syndicated newspaper strip My Friend Irma, based on the radio comedy starring Marie Wilson. By the end of the decade, Lee had become dissatisfied with his career and considered quitting the field. Marvel Comics. Marvel Revolution. Later Marvel years. Beyond Marvel. Lee stepped away from regular duties at Marvel in the 1990s, though he continued to receive an annual salary of $1 million as chairman emeritus. In 1998 he and Peter Paul began a new internet-based superhero creation, production, and marketing studio, Stan Lee Media. It grew to 165 people and went public through a reverse merger structured by investment banker Stan Medley in 1999, but, near the end of 2000, investigators discovered illegal stock manipulation by Paul and corporate officer Stephen Gordon. Stan Lee Media filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in February 2001. Paul was extradited to the U.S. from Brazil and pleaded guilty to violating SEC Rule 10b-5 in connection with trading his stock in Stan Lee Media. Lee was never implicated in the scheme. Following the success of Fox Studios' 2000 X-Men film and Sony's then-current Spider-Man film, Lee sued Marvel in 2002, claiming that the company was failing to pay his share of the profits from movies featuring the characters he had co-created. Because he had done so as an employee, Lee did not own them, but in the 1990s, after decades of making little money licensing them for television and film, Marvel had promised him 10% of any future profits. Lee and the company settled in 2005 for an undisclosed 7-figure amount. In 2001, Lee, Gil Champion, and Arthur Lieberman formed POW Entertainment to develop film, television, and video game properties. Lee created the risque animated superhero series Stripperella for Spike TV. That same year, DC Comics released its first work written by Lee, the Just Imagine series, in which Lee reimagined the DC superheroes Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and The Flash. In 2004, POW! Entertainment went public through a reverse merger again structured by investment banker Stan Medley. Also that year, Lee announced a superhero program that would feature former Beatle Ringo Starr as the lead character. Additionally, in August of that year, Lee announced the launch of Stan Lee's Sunday Comics, a short-lived subscription service hosted by ComicsWorks.com. From July 2006 until September 2007, Lee hosted, co-created, executive produced, and judged the reality television game show competition Who Wants to Be a Superhero? On the Sci-Fi Channel. In March 2007, after Stan Lee Media had been purchased by Jim Nesfield, the company filed a lawsuit against Marvel Entertainment for $5 billion, claiming Lee had given his rights to several Marvel characters to Stan Lee Media in exchange for stock and a salary. In June 2007, Stan Lee Media sued Lee, his newer company, POW! Entertainment, and POW! Subsidiary QED Entertainment. In 2008, Lee wrote humorous captions for the political fumetti book Stan Lee Presents Election Days, What Are They Really Saying? In April of that year, Brighton Partners and Rainmaker Animation announced a partnership with POW! To produce a CGI film series, Legion of Five. Other projects by Lee announced in the late 2000s included a line of superhero comics for Virgin Comics, a TV adaptation of the novel Hero, a foreword to Skyscraperman by skyscraper fire safety advocate and Spider-Man fan Dan Goodwin, a partnership with Guardian Media Entertainment and the Guardian Project to create NHL superhero mascots, and work with the Eagle Initiative program to find new talent in the comic book field. In October 2011, Lee announced he would partner with 1821 Comics on a multimedia imprint for children, Stan Lee's Kids Universe, a move he said addressed the lack of comic books targeted for that demographic, and that he was collaborating with the company on its futuristic graphic novel Romeo and Juliet, The War, by writer Max Work and artists Kinsrisawan. At the 2012 San Diego Comic-Con International, Lee announced his YouTube channel, Stan Lee's World of Heroes, which airs programs created by Lee, Mark Hamill, Peter David, Adrienne Curry and Bonnie Burton, among others. Lee wrote the book Zodiac, released in January 2015, with Stuart Moore. The film Stan Lee's Annihilator, based on a Chinese prisoner-turned-superhero named Ming and in production since 2013, was released in 2015. In 2008, POW! Entertainment debuted the manga series Karakuri Daji Ultimo, a collaboration between Lee and Hiroyuki Take, Viz Media, and Shueisha. The following year POW! Released Heroman, which was written by Lee, and serialized in Square Enix's monthly Shonen Gongen with the Japanese company Bones. In 2011, Lee started writing a live-action musical, The Yin and Yang Battle of Tao, and created the limited series Blood Red Dragon, a collaboration with Todd McFarlane and Japanese rock star Yoshiki. The 2000s saw Lee's public persona penetrate the public consciousness through merchandising, branding, and appearances in Marvel books as a character in the Marvel Universe. In 2006, Marvel commemorated Lee's 65 years with the company by publishing a series of one-shot comics starring Lee himself meeting and interacting with many of his CO creations, including Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, The Thing, Silver Surfer, and Doctor Doom. These comics also featured short pieces by such comics creators as Joss Whedon and Fred Hembeck, as well as reprints of classic Lyridan adventures. At the 2007 Comic-Con International, Marvel Legends introduced a Stan Lee action figure. The body beneath the figure's removable cloth wardrobe is a reused mold of a previously released Spider-Man action figure, with minor changes. Comikaze Expo, Los Angeles' largest comic book convention, was rebranded as Stan Lee's Kamikaze presented by POW Entertainment in 2012. At the 2016 Comic-Con International, Lee introduced his digital graphic novel Stan Lee's God Woke, with text originally written as a poem he presented at Carnegie Hall in 1972. The print book version won the 2017 Independent Publisher Book Awards Outstanding Books of the Year Independent Voice Award. On July 6, 2020, Genius Brands acquired exclusive worldwide rights to use Lee's name, physical likeness, and signature as well as licensing rights to his name and original IPs from POW Entertainment. The assets will be placed under a new joint venture with POW, called Stan Lee Universe. In 2022, Marvel signed a licensing deal with Stan Lee Universe to use Lee's name and likeness in film and television projects, as well as attractions and merchandising. Bibliography. Books. Lee, Stan, Mayer, George. Excelsior, The Amazing Life of Stan Lee. Simon & Schuster. ISBN 978-0-7432-2800-8. Lee, Stan. Origins of Marvel Comics. Marvel Entertainment Group. ISBN 978-0-7851-0551-0. Lee, Stan, David, Peter. Amazing, Fantastic, Incredible, A Marvelous Memoir. Simon & Schuster. ISBN 978-15011077771. Comics Bibliography. Lee's comics work includes DC Comics, Marvel Comics, Simon & Schuster. Other accolades. The County of Los Angeles and the City of Long Beach declared October 2, 2009, Stan Lee Day. Boston's Mayor Marty Walsh named August 2, 2015 as Stan Lee Day for the city during the annual Boston Comic-Con event. The office of New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio announced that October 7, 2016 was Stan Lee Day for the city during the New York Comic-Con event. At the onset of the 2016 Stan Lee's Kamikaze Expo in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles City Council announced that October 28, 2016 was Stan Lee Day. On July 14, 2017, Lee and Jack Kirby were named Disney Legends for their creation of numerous characters that later comprised Disney's Marvel Cinematic Universe. On July 18, 2017, as part of D23 Disney Legends event, a ceremony was held at the TCL Chinese Theater on Hollywood Boulevard where Stan Lee imprinted his hands, feet, and signature in cement. The New York City Council voted on July 23, 2019 to name a section of University Avenue in the Bronx, between Brant Place and West 176th Street, as Stan Lee Way. Fictional portrayals. Marvel Comics, DC Comics. Other publishers. Lee and other comics creators are mentioned in Michael Chabon's 2000 novel set in the early comics industry The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. Under the name Stanley Lieber, he appears briefly in Paul Malmont's 2006 novel The Chinatown Death Cloud Peril. In Levi Titter's 2013 The Violent Century, Lee appears as Stanley Martin Lieber as a historian of superhumans. Film and television appearances. Lee had cameo appearances in many Marvel film and television projects, including those within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. A few of these appearances are self-aware and sometimes reference Lee's involvement in the creation of certain characters. He additionally voiced a cameo appearance as himself in the 2018 DC Comics movie Teen Titans Go! To the Movies. Out of respect for Lee, Marvel Studios enacted a new policy following his death that forbids cameos by Lee in new films by using archive footage of him, with Avengers: Endgame marking his final appearance. the film was released several months after his death. Lee was featured with his colleagues and family in the 2010 documentary With Great Power, The Stan Lee Story, which explored his life, career, and creations. See also